Hi friends, Robin here from Cheese from Scratch, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make Gouda cheese. So today is kind of a busy day. It is May long weekend this weekend, which is usually planting weekend. So I've been spending a lot of time in the garden, but I also have 2 cows in milk, and I have 2 days worth of milk here, which is 11 gallons of milk in this pot right now. So I really have to process milk today, but I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to pick up seed potatoes from a neighbor later. So just not a ton of time to spend in the kitchen, but I need to process that milk and preserve it for later days. So I'm going to be making Gouda cheese today because it is a really good cheese to kind of fit into a smaller margin of your day, but it's also a cheese that can be aged long term. For example, you can be eating it at 6 weeks, but you can also be eating it at 6 months and even a year. So it's a really good cheese for that, and so I'm going to be taking you guys along with that. So I just warmed my milk up. I've got fresh milk from this morning's milking in the pot, as well as skimmed milk from yesterday's milking. I've warmed the milk up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of my recipes are warming the milk up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not very often that I'm kind of going away from that. We're going to be using the recipe out of my new cheese making book, Cheese from Scratch, Natural Cheese Making from Home. So I will link that down below. You guys can pre-order it now, and if you pre-order, you get a bunch of pre-order bonuses, which one of them is actually a digital copy of the book sent to you right away, so you can start making the cheeses, and then when the physical book ships early June, then you can also have that. So I'm going to be making Gouda with clabber culture today, but in the book you also have the option of using freeze-dried mesophilic culture. So if you're using freeze-dried mesophilic culture, once you warm your milk up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you're just going to evenly sprinkle that over the surface of the milk. You're going to let it sit for 5 minutes. It's going to rehydrate during this time, and then you're going to gently incorporate it into the milk. Because I'm using clabber culture, I have a method of doing it where I just like to take a little bit of milk out of the pot, so just scoop some milk out of that pot right there. And we're just going to take this over to my counter. You see I've got quite a few jars of cream that I skimmed off to make into butter today later. So I'm just letting those warm up to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. In my book, I also teach you guys how to make butter, and I go into a ton of troubleshooting for it. Because sometimes butter is so easy to make, and sometimes it can be a bit of a pain, especially if your cow is at a certain point in their lactation where the cream is really soft or the butter fat is really soft. So lots and lots of troubleshooting in my new book. Now, I've got my clabber culture here. This is well-fed clabber culture. You're going to learn how to make this in the book. You have to maintain it just like a sourdough starter, so it needs to be fed every single day. I just fed this yesterday, so it is ready to go for cheese making.
Did you milk yet?
Yes, I did.
What are you doing?
Just filming a YouTube video. What were you guys doing? Were you checking fast? Oh, that's all the milk that's in the cheese pot. Alright, so I've whisked up my clabber culture with some more milk from the pot, and I'm just going to gently add that in.
If you cap it, that's 2 points.
Just going to gently incorporate that in with some up and down stirring motions. Alright, and so now I'm going to add my rennet in. I'm going to be using enough rennet for 11 gallons of milk today. The recipe in the book is a 4-gallon recipe though. So you can move it up or down a little bit. You don't want to go below 2 gallons, but you can cut it in half if you want to. I wouldn't cut it in a quarter. And then so once you have that, just dilute your rennet in a little bit of water. We're going to add this into the pot. Up and down stirring motions. I'm going to take my spoon and put it kind of sideways in the pot just to stop the milk from moving. A little stopper. Alright, now I'm going to cover the pot and I'm going to let it sit for 1 hour, and then we're going to come back and check for a clean break. All right, so it's been 1 hour. My cheese has been sitting for that time covered, and I'm just gonna come and check for a clean break. I can tell that this cheese is ready to go on to the next step though, because it even could have gone on a little bit sooner. I can tell that it is nice and coagulated. I'll show you how I check for a clean break here though. So I like to make a little slit and then just go up underneath and get a nice clean break. You can also kind of check from the side here, lift up on the edge. If it breaks nice like that, you know you're ready to go on. So for this recipe, I'm going to be cutting these curds into 1-inch cubes. So all I do is I'm going to extend all the way down to the bottom of my pot. My knife doesn't quite fit, but I'm not too worried about that. I'll fix it later on. And I'm just going to cut 1 inch apart along this pot. So I'm going to make what is called a grid of curds. So first I'm going to cut all these horizontal 1-inch lines across, or sorry, vertical 1-inch lines across, and then I'm going to cut horizontally. Right, so this looks like a checkerboard pattern. I'm going to put a lid on this pot. Right now these curds are long pillars. They should extend all the way to the bottom of your pot. Mine don't really, because my knife wasn't long enough, but they should extend all the way to the bottom of your pot. And then we will come back in 5 minutes and we're going to cut underneath and make those curds into smaller cubes. All right, so it's been 5 minutes. I'm going to take the lid off now. We're going to cut these curds into smaller pieces. So I'm just going to go underneath the curd mass and just cut the best that I can. It's pretty impossible to get all your curds sort of even, but just do the best that you can, and we're going to fix any uneven curds later on. Just be gentle though, they are pretty fragile. Notice the top of my curds look a little funny, like they're a little broken, and that's sometimes what happens with the clabber culture. I just didn't whisk it up good enough in that pre-milk, and that's why I do use that pre-milk from the pot and mix the clabber culture in there, because if you add the clabber right into the milk, you often will see this. So it's not a big deal, it's just that clabber culture. So now I'm going to put the lid on the pot and wait another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and stir these. All right, so it's been 5 minutes. These are essentially cubes in my pot now, and so I'm going to start stirring. So the first step of my recipe is to stir for 5 minutes, and then you're going to let it rest for 5 minutes, stir for 5 minutes again, and then let it rest for 5 minutes. So there's these rest periods, and this is one of the reasons that I like this cheese. I often make this cheese when I have a bunch of butter to make. Today I'm making a bunch of butter because it kind of gives me breaks where I can deal with that butter, or I can do dishes, or I can help a kid with something, and I don't have to be standing here the whole time. There are some more intensive stirring phases later on that we'll get into, but just for this preliminary first beginning stage, it's only 5 minutes. During this first 5 minutes of stirring, what I'm going to be doing is paying special attention to getting the curds down to a more uniform size. So a lot of the curds are going to be a little bit larger than I want them to be, so I'm just going to be gently breaking them down into smaller cubes, and this first phase is just going to be a really gentle phase. So just, especially because my knife didn't reach all the way to the bottom of the pot, I'm just going to bring those big curds up and just gently pull them apart. I'm not trying to crush anything. That's the important piece of this, because oftentimes you'll find a big curd and you just kind of have this desire to want to crush it, but you just want to really gently pull it apart. Basically, you can even keep like a butter knife beside you and just cut those curds into smaller pieces. So I'm just going to do this for the first 5 minutes, then I'm going to let it rest. Alright, so I've been stirring for 5 minutes, and I'm going to let this rest for 5 minutes. During that rest period, I'm going to cover the pot. I want to preserve the warmth in this pot because that's going to facilitate the fermentation and just help me make a better cheese. Alright, back again for another 5 minutes of stirring. The curds are still some that are a little bit bigger, but we're just going to work to get those down to size as I continue on the stirring here. So just gently cutting them into smaller pieces. Ooh, there's some really big ones in there. A whale! So I'm just going to cut that gently into some smaller pieces. Alright, and now I'm going to let it rest again for one final stretch of 5 minutes. and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so this has been sitting for 5 minutes. Now what I'm going to do, the next step is I'm going to pull off whey, and then I'm going to replace that whey with 120 degree Fahrenheit water, and what this is going to do is two things. One, it's called a washing step, where you're actually washing some of the lactose, which is the sugar in the milk or the bacteria food for your starter culture. It's actually washing some of that away, so it's going to affect how this cheese ferments, but it's also going to increase the temperature in this pot. So I haven't heated this milk at all since that initial heating to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is going to bring the temperature of the pot up. Alright, so I've got a 5-gallon bucket here to use. I'm going to take a fine mesh strainer and a measuring cup. I'm going to put the fine mesh strainer into the cheese pot, and I'm going to pull whey out of that fine mesh strainer. And this method is going to keep me from getting any curds in my discard. So you can see I'm just scooping right out of that strainer, and this is just keeping me from getting any sort of curds into the pot, or into the discard.
So what I see in this box right here is what you're filming?
Yeah, that's right. Alright, so you can film me getting some water from here. We're going to go right till we see the surface of the curds, this dipping method. Okay, we can see the surface of the curd. Jasper, can you see the surface of the curds?
What's the surface?
Like, you can see those curds there?
Yeah.
Can you see it in your video?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see that? Alright, so that's good enough. Now we're going to add in a gallon of 120 Fahrenheit water per 4 gallons in the pot. Yep. So we're going to add in a gallon of 120 Fahrenheit water per gallon, per 4 gallons of milk that's in the pot. So I have about 11 gallons in here, so I'm going to be adding approximately 3 gallons. But your recipe for the 4-gallon one is just going to instruct for a gallon. And this is going to increase the temperature of the pot to 95 degrees Fahrenheit.
I'm doing cameraman.
How did your garden go?
Where's Gus?
Did you bring the seeds?
Yeah, I bring the seeds in.
Where's Gus? Thank you.
Where's Gus? Gus just has to bring the water and I didn't have my pans.
Oh, nice. Alright, just 3 gallons there. So now we're going to stir the curds for 10 minutes non-stop. The temperature in your pot is 95 degrees Fahrenheit now. And we're just going to gently stir these curds up. Keep them from clumping at the bottom of the pot. Perfect. Thank you, Jasper. That's good enough. Right, so I've been stirring for 10 minutes now. The curds look about this. When I squeeze them in my hands, they kind of cling together, but not very well yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow them to sink below the whey, which doesn't take long at all. They pretty much do it instantly. And now I'm going to take whey off to the surface of the curds again. Again, fine mesh strainer into the pot. And just going to scoop right out of that strainer. And again, we're just going until we can see the surface of the curds. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put in a gallon of 110 Fahrenheit water for that 4-gallon batch. Because I'm doing a larger batch again, I'm going to be using about 3 gallons. And this is going to bring the temperature of the pot up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the temperature of my pot should be about 100 degrees. And I'm going to stir this for 20 minutes now. So this is the big stir. Curds kind of look like this at this point. So 20 minutes of stirring. Alright, so I'm ready to go on to my next step. When I swish the hands are the curds between my hands. They kind of cling together. You can see that they're clung together like that. But when I rub my thumb over, they're actually going to break off into individual curds. So they're not just going to kind of make their own new curds. They're going to be individual curds. When I take a curd that is sort of kind of the majority curd in the whole pot, let me find one that's not stuck to another one, and I push it down between my fingers, it's going to flatten like gum versus shattering. If it shatters, they're not quite ready, but when it flattens, just like gum, ready to go on to the next step. Alright, so now I'm going to drain the whey off of the surface of my curds, get as much whey out of the pot as I can. If you can't lift your pot, you can just use that strainer and scooping method. You don't have to do this dumping method. I'm going to get most of the way out if I can. I want to leave a little bit back though, because I do need some for my cheesecloth for the next step. Alright, so those curds are in the bottom there, and I'm going to move them over to the counter now. Alright, so first things first, I've got my cheese forms. If you are making the 4-gallon batch, you're just going to need one cheese form. I am making a large batch, so I need 2. Alright, so I'm just going to wet my cheesecloth in the whey. That's still at the bottom of my pot. And then I'm just going to lay it smoothly in my first cheese form. And then I'm just going to break pieces off, pretty large pieces off of the curds, and I'm just going to pack them in. And you pack pretty firmly. Alright, and I'm going to pile them a little bit high. I might have to take some of these off, but they are going to drain down, so I'm going to let them sit in this cheese form without any pressure on for 10 minutes, and they're going to drain significantly in that 10 minutes. Just to keep the curds warm, I'm going to pull one corner over top and let this sit for 10 minutes. You can see how much whey is in the bottom of this cheese form, or this pan right now, and that's going to increase as it sits for that 10 minutes. Now this one, I think I'm going to make this into a flavored cheese. So I'm going to find some spices. You want to use dried spices when you make a flavored cheese. Some people sterilize their spices before they add them into their cheese. That's up to you. I've never really had a problem with using just store-bought spices that aren't sterilized. But in my book, I do go into how to sterilize them if that is something you want to do. It's been a while since I did a dill one. I think I'm going to do a dill. So I am limited on how much I can use. I only have a little bit left. I'm going to throw that in there. And just sprinkle it on the curds, and then I'll just mix that up before I pack them in. Alright, so these dill curds are going to go into this press. Same thing, just going to grab, now that I've mixed it up, they're not such big, giant chunks, but I'm just going to grab the curds and firmly pack them into the cheese press. Or into the cheese form, I should say. And again, just letting this sit for 10 minutes, I'm just going to fold one corner over the top just to keep it warm. Alright, so these cheeses have been sitting for about 10 minutes in their forms. You can see there's quite a bit more whey in these little bins that I have. Oops. So, I use a Dutch press. In my book, I teach you how to use all sorts of different presses. I even teach you how to make up something called a bucket press. I also have a YouTube video on how to set up a bucket press. This is called a Dutch press. The book will go into details on how to use this press. I love the Dutch press because I can actually press 2 cheeses at once. And you can do this in different styles of presses, but it really effectively presses 2 cheeses at once. So all I'm going to do to get ready for pressing here is I'm going to open my cheese up. I'm going to set my hand on the surface of the cheese, and I'm just going to go around and pull up the edges. And this is going to just make it have a smoother rind. And then I'm going to take, again, one side. The chickens keep getting in my garden, those bad little chickens. We are working on a revamp of their coop, but because they can fly over the top of it, but it's not quite done yet. So it's a full-time job watching. They don't eat things. All right, so I squeeze out the cheesecloth best I can. And I'm going to take these off of there so that they're not going to be crumpled, so you just have one smooth edge. So that is going to go in there, but first I got to put my other one in there. So this one also has quite a bit of whey in it. I'm actually going to dump this whey out to just make it easier. Alright, so this is our regular one. Again, just hand on the top of the cheese, going around the edge to pull up any wrinkles out. It's going to make a smoother rind for you. One over top, and now this one is going to go on top here, and it's going to act as a follower for the bottom cheese. Now, your recipe, if you're using the one from the book, is only going to make 1 cheese, but this is making 2. And then my follower is going to go on top of the top one. Just put these in the other ones. I'm going to roll them around so that you can see better. There's a lot of cloth going on here. I'm going to do the same with this one. Put all the cloth at the back, just for the purpose of videoing. So I'm going to set that square in my cheese form. This is right over top of that one. This one's right over top of that one. And now I'm going to press it at light pressure for about half an hour, and then I'm going to come back and redress it. And so without using any fancy math equations, what I'm calling light pressure is when I see whey seeping out of the cheese form but not running. If it's running out, I'm pressing too much too fast. So I'm going to be looking. Sometimes it runs just for a second while you're just getting, it's just kind of all settling. Okay, now it's just dripping. So I'm calling this light pressure. So this cheese is pressing down on this cheese, this follower is pressing down on this cheese. Right, so the whey is just seeping out, it's not running out. Running out, I don't want. Seeping is fine. So that makes me know that I'm not applying too much pressure, and I'm going to come back in half an hour. I'll pull these cheeses out, redress them, so that means rewrap them up in the cheesecloth, and then put them back in the press at medium pressure. There's that kind of cheese that you liked, Jasper, from the park the other day. It's in the fridge.
Well, I only got 3 days.
Okay.
Where is Daddy? What is Daddy doing?
He's in town, remember?
What?
He's in town.
Why do I hear food?
Oh, that was Mama. Do you get Jasper too?
Okay.
Because Mommy's just busy.
Ooh. Your turn. My turn. Okay. Wait. More. Ready? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Hey, Axel, are you ready to go?
I have 2 more than you.
So after redressing these cheeses, I put them back in the press at medium pressure for another 8 hours. I was just checking here to make sure that there was no whey running. Again, I just want it to drip, never run. You can see that it is starting to get dark outside. I had just come in from milking and it was time to take my cheeses out of the press. So just pulling them out of the press, I try to make sure that I pull my cheeses out of the press when the recipe asks for it, that I'm not leaving my cheeses in the press overnight. This is going to help prevent over fermentation, which is going to cause off flavors in your cheese, but it's also going to keep your cheesecloth from sticking. So if you have left it in there all night, sometimes it's pretty difficult to get the cheesecloth off. So just pulling them out at that 8-hour mark and getting them salted. So I have a couple different options for salting. Both of them are in the book. So you can either surface salt or you can brine salt. I only have one brine bucket currently going, so I was going to brine salt one and then surface salt the other one. So this is called a saturated brine. I teach you how to make it in the book, but it will last a really long time if you keep it in the refrigerator in your cheese cave. What I always do when I brine salt cheeses is I put a little bit of salt on the surface of the cheese, and this keeps you from having to come back and flip the cheese over, and it also replenishes salt in the brine, because every time you brine a cheese in there, it's going to be pulling some of that salt out. So adding more salt onto the top of the cheese is just going to replenish that brine, and it's going to help you keep your brine longer and better. Now that brine bucket is going to go into my refrigerator or your cheese cave overnight and just let that cheese salt for about 3 hours per pound of cheese. So now I'm going to surface salt this other one. So these two methods are interchangeable. I just take salt and I rub it onto the surface of the cheese, and all of the salt is just going to seep into the cheese while it sits on the drying rack. You could put this in a container and you could dry it in the fridge overnight. I'd probably recommend that. I have been making a lot of cheese and I was kind of out of drying containers, so I just left it on the rack overnight, as long as the room isn't too hot, as long as it's not exceeding 72 degrees Fahrenheit, then you should be good to just leave it onto the rack. And then tomorrow, what you're going to do is you're going to take those cheeses and you are going to put them into ripening containers, and you're going to put them into your aging area, and you're going to let them dry for about 2 to 5 days until they're nice and dry to the touch. And once they are nice and dry to the touch, then you can go ahead and vacuum seal them, and they can go into your cheese cave or cheese aging area, and they can sit in there for 6 months to 6 weeks to a year. Whenever you want to enjoy them, you can enjoy them at any of those dates. Now, I did a video last week on how to make a Colby cheese, so I showed how I actually put those cheeses into the ripening containers and what the ripening containers look like. The video before last week's was actually a complete video all about ripening containers and how I control humidity in my aging area, so you can also check out that video if you want a little bit more details on what that entails. But all of this stuff is in my new physical cheese making book, so if you guys check out that link that I am linking down below, Cheese from Scratch, Natural Cheese Making from Home, is open for pre-orders for a few more weeks, and then it is going to be out. It is going to be shipping to your homes. If you want to get in on those bonuses, including that PDF version of the book, you want to pre-order in the next couple weeks here. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope that you have a great day, and I'll see you next Monday. So bye!